Welcome to Ever Living, a podcast about valuing life here on Earth and for eternity. We are your life-loving hosts, Cindy
and Jessica.
Every week on Ever Living, we create a space for sharing the stories and voices of those who work and pray to create a culture that values and protects life here in New England and beyond. Welcome to Ever Living.
Yeah. Hi, Cindy.
Hi, Jessica. How are you doing? How was your vacation?
It was very nice. Yes. For those, I don't know if you mentioned it on the other episodes, but I was in Europe. I was in Italy and France for the last 2 weeks. So yeah, it was really great. The beginning was a little rough. We did have a delay with one of our flights getting to France. And that kind of messed some stuff up a little bit. We wound up having to we were supposed to fly to Paris. But then because everything kind of got messed up with the delay, we had to fly straight from Dublin, where we got stuck, to Rome. We had to book another flight, but the trip got better as it went.
Oh, okay. So yeah. Did you skip Paris?
Yeah, it's a very long story, honestly, but basically we only traveled through Paris. So I saw the Eiffel Tower, but from the train. So
okay. Well, I guess there's another reason to go back.
Yeah, my mom already wants to go back. She's like, would you go with me instead? And I'm like, sure, are you paying? But hopefully someday. So yeah, it was great. We had a great trip. It got better. So how about you? How have your last couple weeks been?
Pretty interesting, I guess. Just summer's kind of a different pace of life, so finding different things to do. So I thought
being off from school and everything, you're like my roommate, because she's a teacher and she's off now, and she's trying to find new hobbies, I think, for the summer. So
yeah. Well, something new today is we get to interview someone new on our podcast. He is the former chairman of the Republican Party in New Hampshire. Let's welcome Chris Ager. Yay! Welcome,
Hi, Chris.
Hello, I'm really happy to be here.
Yeah, thank you for being here with us. How are you doing?
Great. Just can't wait till the 4th of July festivities and a beautiful summer ahead of us.
Yeah. No, it's been nice so far. I feel like the weather has been holding up, and it's been really warm this week, which has been really nice. So yeah. But yeah, so could you, as Cindy mentioned, you're the former chairman of the Republican Party in New Hampshire. If I'm correct, you served from 2023 to 2025. Is that the correct period of time?
Pretty close. It was
pretty close?
January. Okay. January 23 to January 25. Or no, January 24 to January 26. So,
okay.
The elections are in January, right after the election. Elections in November, so it's right after. Well, it's kind of confusing, but
that makes sense.
I don't even know what year it is now.
I can see how that could be confusing.
Because we think in election cycles.
Okay, that makes sense. Yeah, so it's like the year is always off from that, but awesome. Well, could you tell us, so obviously that's wonderful. Could you tell us, the audience, a little bit more about yourself? Maybe what led you up to, that position, things like that, your background.
Yeah, so I was born in Washington, D.C., grew up there. Our family's from there. And my dad was a union laborer, just like a regular old union guy. And my mom stayed at home. And we had 9 kids in the family. So I was always around kids, family, siblings, went to West Point, and I was in the Army a little while. I came to New Hampshire, and I was in politics a little bit locally, and then I got away from it for about 10 years, and then I came back into it because I was a little bit concerned about what was happening at the national level, especially when President Obama was in office. And then I just kind of worked my way up the system, town chairman, county chairman, national committeeman, and then I ran for party chairman. When I was done with my 2 years, I decided not to run for re-election, but I'm still active in the party. And we did very well the last election in 2024 at the state level. So supermajority in the Senate picked up 20 some seats in the House, and the governor by a big margin. So we have a pretty good Republican state house, the only state house controlled by Republicans north of South Carolina along the East Coast. So it's we're kind of holding on.
That's awesome.
Sometimes we think we're holding on by our fingernails, which means when you get into political issues that are difficult, we've got to negotiate through those, with conviction, but we've got to be very savvy. And that's the art and nature of politics. And that's why a lot of people don't like politics is, you got to make that compromise sometimes to stay elected, or else everything goes terribly wrong with the other side.
It's very impressive that how many seats you guys picked up in the last election. I actually, I'm very familiar with one of them. I door knocked for Sam Farrington. He's in, I think, Rochester, one of the Rochester districts, and he flipped. He was one of those seats that flipped in New Hampshire. He's pro-life. So love what you said about convictions and things like that. I read that in an article from 2023. Just a quote from you. You said, Republicans should stop trying to appeal to people in the middle. We're not going to be Democrat light. That is no way to win. And I just wonder if you could elaborate a little bit more on that.
Yeah, so I said that as a party chairman. And as a party, we really have to stand for something. And, it doesn't mean do something stupid either. Sometimes you've got to negotiate after you see how the lay of the land is. But you've got to stand for something. And if you stand for something, then you can solidify your base of support. And then you don't ignore the voters in the middle, because you need some of them to win. But you try to convince them of why what you're doing is a good and right thing. And if you can convince them that what you're doing is a good thing, then you can get them to come over, even if they didn't initially agree with you. And so it's kind of the art of convincing people. And the other thing, voters like people who stand for something, even if they sometimes disagree with you. They like that kind of person who stands for something. And in the abortion debate, it gets very, very difficult based on our demographics. And so, how do you thread that needle and stay true to your convictions without committing political suicide? And so it's a very difficult thing. I'd love to talk about some specifics about what we did in 2024, because it was controversial with some of our pro-life friends. But overall, it was very successful. And, we live in a state that is the second lowest in church attendance, right behind Vermont. And if you look at various polls, you can create a poll to tell you what you want to hear. But most of the polling that I've seen, the kind of independent polling, not done by a party or advocating, said that about between 66 and 75% of people self-identify as pro-choice over pro-life. That's a stunning number up here in the Northeast. And so how do you then promote what you stand for when you have a demographic that's self-identifies with the code name of the opposite side? That doesn't mean that they agree 100% pro-choice, but that's how they identify. So what kind of terminology do you use? How do you approach it and maintain your conviction, but still win elections? And a very, very, very tricky thing up here in the Northeast, especially.
Yeah, it may take convincing people that to be pro-life is to be supportive of women, is to want to seek women's empowerment and support them if they choose to be mothers, to help them with that.
I think what Xindi said was interesting about convincing that yes, being pro-life is being pro-woman as well. But I also think like what you said about being pro-choice, when people identify as pro-choice, and I'm curious what you have to think about this. Do you think that maybe is just because maybe the Democrats kind of control the narrative on this issue, that maybe people aren't as pro-choice as they think they are. Like, pro-choice just sounds nice because it sounds like pro-liberty, pro-freedom. But would you argue that maybe more people think that there should be some restrictions on abortion at some point, at least, that say they're pro-choice?
Yeah, I believe there are a lot of people who identify as pro-choice, but they say, well, I personally don't like abortion. I think it's wrong, but I don't want to tell somebody else that you have to do what I believe. And, that's a very difficult moral position to be in. How do you say, I disagree with it, but it's okay if you do it? So I think a lot of the pro-choice, self-identified pro-choice people, really, if they're given an alternative that articulates it clearly and says, hey, today we have up to 24 weeks, a pregnant woman can have an abortion for any reason whatsoever. 15 weeks or 19 weeks or 17, some number that we can put some medical information, and say, hey, at this point, generally, that baby has certain characteristics. 24, okay, maybe it's earlier, but we have to explain that to people and say, hey, there's a reason. We're not just trying to walk down a slippery slope in your view towards, banning all abortion. It's like, well, this makes sense. If we explain it to people and say, we're not trying to be onerous on these expectant mothers. We care about them. We could see some changes in our state law. I don't think the electorate's ready for it right now, but I think shortly, in the next few years, they will be. The other thing we have to do is we have to shift. We have to shift to a message of caring for the mothers and the babies. And in this last legislative session, we were able to add into the budget bill something called the Momnibus, which were a lot of separate issues that helped moms and babies. So it wasn't just about creating a law to restrict abortions, it was helping mothers and babies.
The policy initiatives that you put together in the legislature were things that weren't really budget heavy, so they didn't really cost a lot of money, and you informed those decisions by going and visiting pregnancy resource centers and seeing what they do. Is that basically what you said?
Yeah, visiting the resource centers was critical.
That's wonderful. I think, pregnancy resource centers, I've gotten to work with them a bit as well in my role. So I work for Students for Life. That's what I do, my day job. I'm their regional coordinator for New England. So I've gotten to work with them, pregnancy resource centers, a lot. And as a student, even, we were able to work with them to bring, the local one to me had a resource van that we were able to bring to campus. I went to UConn, and we brought that van to campus to provide like free ultrasounds and pregnancy tests to students. So yeah, I think like the resources that they have to offer, advertising them, I think creating a positive image of pregnancy resource centers is such an important thing to do as well, because in so many states they've been attacked for really not often a very good reason. So yeah, I think I think you brought up really good points. Yes, kind of shifting the Overton window of, public opinion on the issue of abortion and giving an actual reason why, sharing fetal development markers with people, but also supporting mothers and babies through policy, especially policy that doesn't cost a lot of money. I think that's awesome. Another question I had for you, just kind of on the note of like shifting public opinion on the issue. And I know you said, you didn't feel that the electorate's ready for it now, but maybe over the next couple years, shifting the issue of abortion. I guess wanted to get your thoughts on this. So New Hampshire Cornerstone, they surveyed New Hampshire voters and found that 60 to 64% of New Hampshire voters and 61 to 62% of undeclared voters, so independent voters, actually believe that we should support protecting life at 15 weeks, so that there should be a restriction on abortion, after 15 weeks. And I think that those numbers are really interesting. And I was just wondering, like, what your thoughts are on that and how you believe that should inform campaigns in the future and how, Republicans run for office in the future, and especially on this issue.
Okay. Yeah. So I'm very familiar with the data orbital poll that Cornerstone did. I read the whole thing and the exact questions. The same day, October 23rd, 2024, right before 2 weeks before the election, Planned Parenthood released a poll from UMass Lowell. They had the exact opposite headline of Cornerstone. So their headline was that 66% of likely voters oppose a 15-week abortion ban. Cornerstone had roughly the same thing, 65% or 67% supported 15 weeks. So I dug down into both polls. Both organizations misled the public with their headlines. Both. So you can't really trust a poll.
Interesting.
And the summary put out by the organizations, because they're pushing what they want people to believe. So I call them push polls because you're pushing opinion. You're pushing opinion instead of reporting. So what actually they asked was, do you support restrictions on abortion between 15 weeks and the moment of birth? Well, yeah, a lot of people do that because they're thinking third trimester. They didn't say, do you support moving from 24 weeks to 15? They didn't ask that question. They said from 15 to birth. Planned Parenthood did the exact same thing in reverse. And so their question was more of, do you think there should be, all these restrictions? Do you think there should be total restrictions after 15 weeks? And people said no. And so both sides twisted polling to get the answer they wanted. We do polling because we want to understand the issue, not to push it. Our polling says 60%, anywhere between 60 to 75% self-identifies pro-choice, but that most people in the state, about 2/3, support the 24-week third trimester restrictions. And so we've got to move that Overton window down. It's not at 15 weeks. That is outside of the Overton window today. We got to move it there by explaining to people. The other thing, if we banned abortions in New Hampshire today, there would still be abortions if we just voted a state law, because Planned Parenthood and other organizations have already said they would pay for women to go to other states to have abortions. And New Hampshire's kind of small. We're surrounded by pro-abortion states. 70 miles is the furthest you have to go if you draw in New Hampshire, the furthest place from a state that offers abortions, 70 miles. So we do have to do more than make laws. We have to change the culture, and we have to help these women so that they don't feel compelled or forced to get an abortion. We need to support them and help them so that they can choose the right decision. Okay.
No, I agree. I mean, I definitely agree that it's a combination of changing the culture and changing laws as well. Personally, I'm a firm believer of, obviously I understand you have to have the ability in the legislature to do this, and you have to have the voting to be able to do this. But I'm a firm believer in, okay, yes, like you said, even if abortion was banned in New Hampshire today, abortions would still happen. Personally, I believe that regardless, though, we shouldn't support, the state shouldn't support abortion, right? So even if abortions would still happen, if we had the ability to end abortion in New Hampshire through policy, okay, yes, abortions might still happen, and that's where the culture part comes in. But I'm just a firm believer in the state should not have laws that support the killing of preborn children. That's my thoughts on that. But Yeah, I do agree with you though that there's definitely a lot to do in terms of changing the culture. I've noticed that as well in the work that I do. I often am on campus in New Hampshire at UNH and St. Anselm, especially at UNH. It's always interesting, hearing students' perspectives there. And there are a lot of students that we do need to change their mind and share with them the truth on what abortion actually is, and also fetal development, and really explain that in depth as well. So yeah, but I guess another question I had for you is about about language. You mentioned that when Cornerstone and that other organization that put out a headline, gave polls basically showing opposite data, right? That most people were thinking of the third trimester, of how they opposed abortion in the third trimester. I guess my question to you is, what is your thought on changing, like often a lot of pro-life laws, things like that, are written in terms of weeks, right? 15 weeks. Do you have any thoughts on using trimester language, right? So like, banning abortion after, or restricting abortion after the first trimester, for example. Do you think that there's what are your thoughts on that, instead of using trimesters instead of weeks?
We decided last year to use 6 months instead of 24 weeks. 24 weeks was in our state law, but people, when they think 24 weeks, they couldn't totally understand it. So we went to 6 months, because you think 6 months, oh, that's 6 out of 9 months. That's most of the way there. 6 months is what we thought people could understand better than 24 weeks when we talk about our state law. We also talked about trimesters, and we did a focus group of young women, because women under 40 voted abortion was their top issue. The rest of the electorate, it was not. So we had a little focus group, and they agreed 6 months was what they understood the best, that could convey the message the best. And so months was what we went with. We thought third trimester, most people just don't support abortions there, but our focus group thought that months was a better way to portray the time frames.
Okay.
Yeah. I've always thought it's interesting that the weeks is used, because like I think that that's really interesting that the focus group said 6 months made the most sense, because exactly, I think a lot of people think in terms of months, and I just think it's so interesting. I think language has so much to do with, how we portray our ideas and how we get the message across. So, yeah, but we're getting kind of close to the end of our time now, but I guess one more question for you. So obviously nowadays, sometimes I think things tend to be very like divided politically, and people, especially around like the life issue, sometimes people think of it, oh, that's just politics, that's just a political issue. I stay out of that. So I guess just like, how can people today think constructively about politics and approach politics? As it seems that things become more controversial, and people just say, I don't want to talk about politics. How would you recommend that our listeners and the average person just approach these issues and have these conversations with their family and friends?
Yeah, and to maintain our friendships or build friendships, and to just be, loving to everyone, no matter who they are.
Yeah, I think we have to, keep the Overton window in mind when we're talking in public. And, if we're too far away from where the mass of the people are, then they're not going to listen. So that's one. And the other is, we have a lot of personal freedoms in this country, and a tremendous amount of freedom. But with the freedom comes responsibility. And we've got a responsibility to people. And, I'm pro-life, even for bad criminals. I used to support the death penalty. I no longer do that. So having a conviction that that you're not preaching to people, but you're explaining, why you believe what you believe, and not yelling at somebody when you disagree with them. Just listen to them and then try to give good arguments. And when we're having discussion, we have to listen to the other side and make good arguments, but try not to be too harsh or judgmental on them, because then they'll shut down and quit listening.
Yeah, I would agree that's super important to, know our audience, know who we're talking to, and love the people in front of us that we're talking to, even if they have a different opinion than us.
I think is that all we have time for today? I think that's a good place to stop. Jessica, do you have a Bible verse to share with our listeners?
Yes, yeah, I do. But thank you, Chris. Thank you for being here with us. We appreciate your perspective and everything. Yes, I do have a Bible verse. So I picked Matthew 6:31 through 34 from the Gospel of Matthew. And it says, "So do not worry, saying, 'What shall we eat?' or 'What shall we drink?' or 'What shall we wear?' For the pagans run after all these things, and your heavenly Father knows that you need them. But seek first his kingdom and his righteousness, and all these things will be given to you as well. Therefore, do not worry about tomorrow, for tomorrow will worry about itself. Each day has enough trouble of its own." And I picked this because I think that this is just a really good verse for anyone, but especially a woman maybe who's facing an unplanned pregnancy and is faced with all these things. How will I take care of my baby? How will I feed them? How will I clothe them? And just trusting the Lord, that the Lord will provide those things, and that he's bigger than all of those things, and will provide. And there are so many resources out there that can provide those things to women, especially, Christian resources out there. So that's my Bible verse for today. How about you, Cindy?
Okay, I chose from 2 Corinthians 4:16 from the ESV Bible. "So we do not lose heart, though our outer self is wasting away, our inner self is being renewed day by day. For this light momentary affliction is preparing for us an eternal weight of glory beyond all comparison, as we look not to the things that are seen, but to the things that are unseen. For the things that are seen are transient, but the things that are unseen are eternal. For we know that if the tent that is our earthly home is destroyed, we have a building from God, a house not made with hands, eternal in the heavens. For in this tent we groan, longing to put on our heavenly dwelling, if indeed by putting it on we may not be found naked. For while we are still in this tent we groan, being burdened, not that we would be unclothed, but that we would be further clothed, so that what is mortal may be swallowed up by life. He who has prepared us for this very thing is God, who has given us the Spirit as a guarantee. So we are always of good courage." So that's from 2 Corinthians, just a reminder that what we see is kind of temporary, and what is eternal is unseen, and that God is preparing that for us, that eternal life. So to not lose heart about. So
I love that.
All right.
That's great.
Well, thanks for joining us today, everybody. Hope we got to hear what we were supposed to hear. And
thank you. Sorry about the connection stuff.
No
worries. It happens.
It happens. Yeah. Thank you for coming on, and thank you for what you do, Chris, and to
thank you.
help people in New Hampshire. So, we'll see you next week, everybody.
Thank you for listening to the Ever Living podcast. If you have scripture, questions, or things you'd like to share, please feel free to email us at everlivingpod@gmail.com. Also, make sure to follow us on Instagram at ever.livingpodcast. And if you like this podcast, please make sure to subscribe and share with a friend, and give us a 5-star review. See you next week. May God bless you and be very near to you, and may you be ever living.